On today's World Insight, as the 100-day countdown to the 6th China International Import Expo begins, a closer look at what the event means for foreign businesses in China.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. This is our special program on the 100 days countdown to the upcoming 2023 China International Import Expo and Hongqiao International Economic Forum. The Expo started in the year 2018. In the past 5 years, China has transformed from a factory of the world to a major market to all economies. As China gradually walked out of the impact of the pandemic, the 6th CIIE in the year 2023 is providing opportunities for global partners to exchange ideas and experiences of dealing with economic challenges and brainstorm about how to move forward together. The Hongqiao Forum is also making openness and cooperation its key message this time.
The Secretariat wishes to work with all parties to contribute to Hongqiao approach to an open world economy and a community of shared future. I thank you all, and I look forward to welcoming you in this autumn, November 5 to 10 in Shanghai.
Openness and cooperation are the key word China wants to deliver to the rest of the world. The country's economic growth in the first half of 2023 reached a higher than expected 5.5%. Meanwhile, the IMF has upgraded its forecast of global growth despite lingering challenges. So openness and cooperation are specifically valued by those who see China's future as vital to their businesses. This is Jochen Goller, the president and CEO of a German car maker in China. Speaking of their plans for CIIE, Jochen told me he and the team see great significance in China today and the big potential for the company's future. In his words, the distance from Shanghai to Munich should be as close as one can imagine. I've always wondered, how many cities you traveled in China?
Well, because of the two different times here, I've traveled more than 100 cities in China. I think probably around 110.
Wow, are you keeping the records?
Yeah, well, I stopped counting, but I guess it's at least 110 cities, and I've been, to almost all provinces here.
I know, you have to travel so much. What is the shortcut? Because I always want to do it the most efficient way.
I can tell you one trick.
Not only in the car, driving the car.
Basically, there's a very effective way to go from Shanghai to Munich. You want to know? Yeah, look.
How?
Shanghai.
So here, this room is named Shanghai. Okay,
and now follow me.
Where is Munich?
It's a very fast way. And
over there. We are already standing here in Munich.
But you see the cooperation again. For example, when you walk around here, you have German names and you have Chinese names. It's a partnership.
It's not just a decoration, it's to make sure everybody understands here.
Yeah, because we are a Sino-German company, so we have Sino-German names,
Got it! I got the tricks! Putting jokes aside, Mr. Goller is an advocate for China's open trade as the country swings its door wider to the world, because he bears witness to China's rapid transition of economic growth and understands it inside out. I think you've been here in China for 2 consecutive periods. Both are very important for China, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The first time I was in China between 2004 and 2009. And this was kind of the time of high growth. You had GDP growth of 10-11%, and also our BMW business grew almost like double sometimes. So it was of course very explosive, but as I said also in the beginning, it was not always high quality. It was high speed growth, if I call it. And the second time was so I went from here to London. I was working 4 years for for a B&O group in UK, then Munich, and I came back in 2015.
Yeah. So then China has changed, right? It was so-called a new normal time.
China has changed because when I came back, I think GDP dropped below 10%, was something 8-9%, and you could already see the move of China towards a more qualitative growth. Yeah? But I think we all know what happens on climate change, and when I came back in 2015, I noticed that sustainability was much more in the focus of the government than before. First of all, the path towards modernization and focus on qualitative growth is absolutely the right way. Yeah? Because when you see how China changed, I mean, some years ago, China was more the workbench for rather, I would say, mass-produced goods, right? I mean, and this has completely changed. So when you look at technology, as I said, in automotive, you look at battery, you look at other components, China is really, on the one side, modernizing, yeah? But on the other side, also focusing on qualitative growth. And you can see this, you know, in 2004, 5, 6, you had 10-11% GDP growth, but the growth was driven not so much by qualitative growth. Yeah? And I think now, of course, you have a much lower GDP growth rate, but the goods produced and the goods engineered are on a much higher qualitative level. And I think that is clearly the right path to go.
One of the very exciting things in recent years is the visit by the Chinese Premier to your home office back in the headquarters. You were there witnessing the whole thing and contributing to the communication. Tell me more about that.
Well, first of all, I think the visit was a great success. Premier Li Qiang and his cabinet went to Berlin, and then they went to Bavaria, to Munich, and we were really honored to host him at our headquarters. So our CEO, Mr. Zipse, and some board members and myself, we received Premier Li Qiang and his cabinet at our B&O headquarters, and we did show him some technology. We also brought some locally produced cars to Munich and did show him the technology, and I think it was a very, very good dialogue.
Through the grapevine, I learned that he was sitting in the car, did not want to come out.
Yeah, no, I think we did show him some really new technology, which is going to come into our cars in a few years. So we did show him some advanced technology. And we had a lot of discussions on ADAS, so on level 2, level 3, which he was extremely interested in technology, which, to be honest, I was really surprised. And he knew a lot.
Well, there's so much talk about new technologies, especially in EV as well. I know you have been a very keen player in pushing on that front line. So tell me more about where are you here today and what does it mean for future trends?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think when you look at the China market, in terms of digitalization and electrification, China is already the #1 market worldwide. Yeah? So not only in terms of sales volume, but also in terms of innovation and technology. And this is really impressive. So obviously what
and you had experienced that from day one almost.
No, I mean, let's say, originally, maybe let me start with, you know, historically in the automotive industry, China was an import market for technology. Yeah? But this has changed now. So we went from for the world to China, yeah, over to in China for China, but now it's also in China for China and for the world. So for example, we are producing some cars here in China, like our battery iX3, which is only produced in China and it's sold in Europe. Yeah? And in the future we will have electric minis produced in Zhangjiagang in Jiangsu province, going to be exported to the world. Yeah? So the whole thing has turned around from importing cars to China now to China exporting, and you have also Chinese brands who are very successfully exporting now.
But what does that mean, you know, in terms of openness and cooperation? This is going to be the key words, of course, for the Hongqiao Forum, which is related to the Import Expo. You know, these are concept words, but actually it's in the work of every day for you. So to you, what does this mean, and how are you connecting what you're doing every day with these concepts?
I mean, first of all, I can only talk for the automotive industry.
Sure.
Yeah? And here China has really consistently pursued opening up. When you look back in the last years, obviously since joining WTO, the market has been more and more open. This is why, you know, a lot of global players have come to China, establishing a product basis, a production basis, R&D basis, And I think it's a win-to-win situation, this opening up in the automotive industry. I think the Import Expo is a very strong signal of China welcoming industries and welcoming import goods. And so therefore, I mean, at every occasion, we have always advocated this.
What does that mean? I mean, for you, it's both cooperation and competition, interestingly.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think competition is making you better. Yeah, and
good kind of competition.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, to be fair, look, China is, as I said, is the number one market for digital and for electrification. When you look at the supplier base, you look at, for example, 5 out of the top 10 battery companies are from China. A lot of digital tech companies, leading ones, are in China. And this is something where, you know, what we benefited from is that we are now partnering with companies like Alibaba and Tencent and Huawei, and it's a win-to-win.
Right.
And we're developing, for example, features and ecosystems together for China, but we're also bringing some of them in our global cars. So again, yes, competition is tough, and the Chinese OEMs are really doing a good job, but I think competition makes you stronger, and most of all, it's beneficial for the customer because they get better products and they get better features.
The Hongqiao International Forum releases a World Openness Report every year. This year's forum focuses on the idea of opening up and set its agenda accordingly. So how is the 2023 CIIE and Hongqiao Forum going to bring new ideas to the world? Let's talk to our panelists. For more on the discussion of the 100 days countdown of the China International Import Expo, we are joined in our studio by Professor Li Ling from the National School of Development of Peking University and Professor Yu Miaojie, the Deputy to National People's Congress and President of Liaoning University. And also we're glad to be joined online by, in Geneva, Richard Kozel-Wright, Director of UNCTAD's Globalization and Development Strategies Division. Ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure to see all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, I'm really looking forward to the eventual China Import Expo and also the Hongqiao Forum. Always a great platform for ideas exchange. So how do you look at the important messages likely to go there? You know, 100 days earlier, looking at the horizon. Professor Li, would you like to help us more?
Sure. I think the important message is the openness and the cooperation.
Great keywords, I guess. What about for you, Professor?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, openness will be the most important, and also cooperation is also another key ideas.
These might sound abstract. However, when it comes to issues, every one of these words matters a lot, isn't it, Richard? I think it would be always wonderful to let all of us to share your stories of openness, your stories of cooperation.
Yeah, for developing countries, because we obviously represent developing countries in UNCTAD, and there's always a fear amongst developing countries that the big players in the global system will only play by their rules and not by a common set of rules, and it's very important that we take this kind of multilateral perspective on the trading system.
So I agree with this idea. So basically, we see that international trade will be one of the most important driving force of the economic growth. For example, just now my colleague talked about the WTO and also the GATT. And we see that once a country deeply integrated into international trade, then usually the economy will be better and better. For example, if you look at China's case, 40 years or 50 years ago, I mean, China was a very small economy in terms of the openness. But now today, China is already the second largest economy in the world, and also the largest trading economy in the world. For example, last year, our annual trade registered $6 trillion, accounting more than 12%. And turning to my personal story, I also have this feeling as well. When I was young, I was grew up in a small village in Guangdong province. But thanks to the opening up, and therefore now today you see Guangdong has already become the very big province even I would like to say, suppose you want the economy, then we'll be one of the biggest economy in the world. So I'm very proud of this.
Indeed. Professor Li, what about yours?
Yeah, mine is probably, I would say, for this Hongqiao import-export is China's innovation. So I think China created this unique import-export is to show our openness and cooperation. And it works. You can see after this 5 years, every year this import-export, we have more and more friends joining, and better trading, and more cooperation, more opening.
We're not just commenting about China, but also the world, as the Hongqiao Forum releases usually a World Openness Report every time. Mr. Kozelwright, tell me more about your thoughts relating to the results of the Openness Index. What does it really show us at this moment?
I think the report does some things that other discussions of openness often fail to do. It recognizes that openness is not just an economic concept, so they have notions of social openness and cultural openness. It's a very rich notion of openness, and that's very important, I think. Within the concept of economic openness, which is one that interests us here in Geneva, there's a very important recognition that it's, there's a tendency often, and particularly on Western economists, to think it's a kind of, it's a bipolar option. Either you're open or you're closed. But of course the world is not so simple. There are different levels of openness that you need to recognize, and for developing countries, of course, the level of openness depends upon their domestic capacities, and some countries are more prepared to open up to the global economy than other countries. And the report uses the concept of warranted openness to describe these different levels.
World Openness Index is very timely and useful and helpful. And particularly, it covers a lot of varieties contents. For example, including the export, but also, as Professor Li just mentioned, also import as well. Export, import, and not only on commercial trade, but also on service trade as well. And not only on the inward FDI, but also the outward FDI. For example, countries from how do they invest in other countries as well. And besides that, we also see they also cover about something like the regional cooperation, for example, the RCEP, CPTPP, and so on. So I want to say the key message from this index is we are still in the year of the globalization.
Yes, indeed. Globalization can be characterized with many personalities in a way. But where are we, Mr. Kozelwright? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, globalization is in trouble. I think we have to recognize that there are both economic and geopolitical tensions now in the global economy that have disrupted the flow of goods and services and capital and indeed people across borders. And that, of course, is a worry. If that intensifies and we move into a more conflictual economic era, then, as I said before, the people who tend to lose in that kind of world are those that have the least amount of skills and power, and those are people in the developing world. So there's we have a real concern, I think, about some of the direction that we've seen over the last 5 years in terms of a tendency to, in a sense, to use a slightly controversial word, an attempt to weaponize trade rather than to use it as a tool of development and progress.
Right. According to you, where are we? How do we see now the energy that people have vis-a-vis the realities we are facing right now?
I think the world is changing. So even we rethinking, reconnected, re-energized, this will be a different world. And I think in this different world, China now is played a leading role for the globalization, especially after this 3 epidemic, COVID-19's pandemic year. I think China keep working on the new track. They create a new track. This is a digital economy, information age, plus green economy. So now look at our trade. It's every year over 60% increase is in the new economy. Electronic vehicle, green economy. So I think China
batteries, solar panels, and the
yes,
list
solar
goes on.
panels. So China as developing country, now they provide the international public goods for the world through this openness and cooperation.
An example about the US 2022, 5 gigawatts of solar panel modules are produced inside the United States. Certainly cannot meet its need, right, for decarbonization. So it imported about 29 gigawatts of solar panel modules from China, Southeast Asia countries as well. But trade is crucial here. And that makes the green economy possible on a faster speed. So it is only one of those many issues of examples we have on hand about trade. So Professor Yu, as an ardent supporter of trade, but certainly sophisticated studier of trade, researcher about trade, how do you see this dilemma it seems that we are facing? On the one hand, things are preventing progress to happen. On the other hand, we are calling for progress. We urgently need it. Look at how hot the weather is today. Look at the world. So Professor Yu, how do you look at this? Right. Sorry, I put a very prolonged question to you. Later, I'm going to also pose that to Mr. Causal-Wright as well. Please.
Yeah. So if we look at today's world trade map, I'm going to say, indeed, the world trade map is separated to 3 trading blocks. One is the RCEP with the hub of China, another one is EU with the hub of Germany, and another one is maybe the USMCA with the hub of the United States. That's number one observation. Number two is, although we have 3 segments, but indeed they try to reconnect together again. So this is what we call the reconnection. For example, people are talking about the TTIP, people are talking about the China and the EU, CIIE, and also people are talking about the RCEP and CPTPP as well. So that's number one. But no matter what, I think the key message is very simple. Trade is not only trade. Trade is related to the economic development, but this economic development is also a very broad issue, for example, including the innovation, the environment, and also I would like to say the coordination. This is what we call the harmony, and also the co-sharing as well. So I think that we need to follow these 5 key ideas to boost the economy, not only for the Chinese economy, but also the whole world economy as well.
I think the unfortunate truth is at the global level, we're still moving in the wrong direction. Emissions need to be heading south, and they're still going up. And so obviously there are real concerns about the direction of travel at the moment, but which is not to say that we see positives, and China's ability to move into the value chains around renewable, both wind and solar, or its ability to move into the electric car market, for example, and batteries, and these are clearly very important moves in the right direction. I think you're right, though. I mean, we need to look at trade in connection with other parts of the economy. So it's not just trade, but it's the way in which we produce goods, it's the way in which we transport goods. All these things have to be put into a common package if we're going to make real progress when it comes to shifting the growth trajectory that we have towards a more low carbon future, and China is beginning to do that, of course. Many developing countries do not, unfortunately, have the kind of capacities that China does, and they're very worried, I think. Many developing countries are very worried that they will get stuck in a kind of low growth, high emitting economy, which is not going to be conducive to them not only meeting their climate responsibilities, but to meeting their basic development responsibilities. Poverty, health, these are still very basic challenges that many developing countries face, and then they need international support. And in a world where we have a lot of geopolitical tensions, that kind of cooperation that they need to face the multiple challenges that they are currently experiencing is not really there, and that's a big concern for institutions like UNCTAD here in Geneva.
Indeed, and we know that we are in the midpoint reaching the 2030 agenda by the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals that all member countries of the UN subscribe to with their own decisions. And now we are facing both challenges and opportunities looking at what's going on right now. Before we wrap up today's discussion, I do want to ask you about this window opportunity. We are facing the midpoint of SDGs. We're also facing a window opportunity before geopolitics, runs out of control with some elections going on in the world, for example, next year. We're also facing an opportunity about ideas. Exactly what fundamental ideas are we going to subscribe to as the human race, in a way? So how do you see this window opportunity? I really wonder, to the three of you. Let's go to Professor Yu first.
Okay, so I think that the most important thing is that people need to fit other people's food as well. So what I want to say is that change the position to consider these things, this challenge and this opportunity. For example, let's talk about the environmental protection. So the key idea is that we need to share, every country have the shared responsibility. The key point is, for example, let's think about, say, the deforest. Suppose you want to have one product, you need to do not destroy the forest. Certainly this is very true, but if you stand on the side of the developing country, they've got to say, well, maybe the developed right will be also very important. Why 100 years ago you do not discuss the carbon emission, but now today you discuss. And they will also say, well, although I produce this product, but the consumption side, the consumer consume that, and then the consumer had to buy the bill, right? But suppose we stand on the consumption side, they will say, well, although I buy this product, but I give you the money, and you also create the job. So I think the key point is how to draw a line between the production side and also the consumption side.
Right.
So the policy implication will be very clear. Every country need to cooperate and then draw a line between the countries. And I do believe that the shared earth and the shared responsibility will be very important for us.
Supply demand is not as simple as we earlier believed. It's much more sophisticated, just as the trade we're talking about. Professor Li, your thoughts on this final question?
Professor Yu's, and I think we're facing a lot of challenge currently. Besides this climate, actually the instability, uncertainty, a lot of things change, as you mentioned before. But I think China now is playing more and more leading role, because in the human society, never have a country with 1.4 billion people. And they are moving to modernization. So traditional trade is based on comparative advantage. But now China, I think we have the economy of scale. The advantage of economy of scale.
Obviously I agree with colleagues who have talked about the need for greater cooperation. One area that we see real opportunities actually is cooperation amongst developing countries, what we call South-South cooperation.
Right.
And we've seen a growth of South-South cooperation over the last 10 years. The Belt and Road is an example of that. The role of the BRICS countries, which is becoming more and more important, I think, is another example of South-South cooperation. And I think we need to see an even bigger scaling up of South-South cooperation if we're going to address these multiple challenges.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are looking forward to all these ideas being further explored at the Hongqiao Forum during the Import Expo in China later this year. And that's all the time we have for this special program on the 100-day countdown to the 2023 China International Import Expo and the Hongqiao International Economic Forum. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of my team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.